Welcome to the Production Livestock Grazing Short Course. This course has been developed by the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils Program Team with funding from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets to provide training for individuals who work with Vermont farmers managing production livestock in pasture systems. The goal of this course is to provide education and resources for new technical service providers with foundational information around grazing planning and providing grazing-related technical assistance to production livestock farmers in Vermont. This course is divided into 5 modules, each covering a different topic area as it relates to providing technical support to grazing operations. You are here. Welcome to Module 1, an introduction to grazing and providing technical assistance to Vermont farmers. The objective of this module is to learn about how livestock agriculture has historically impacted Vermont and how it is shaping the state today. Gain an understanding of the role of technical service providers for grazing operations, and a quick introduction to the different types of how livestock grazing systems are managed. We will begin with a brief history of livestock agriculture in Vermont. Vermont has a long history of agriculture and grazing livestock that has greatly impacted today's landscape. Prior to the 1820s, wheat was the predominant crop. As the textile industry expanded, there was a great demand for sheep's wool, and sheep farming quickly grew. The years between 1824 and 1835 came to be known as sheep mania in Vermont. And in 1837 it was estimated that there were over 1 million sheep in the state. However, by the 1840s, lower cost of production from western farms and changes in tariff laws led to severe wool pricing declines and busts for Vermont shepherds. In 1840, 4 out of 5 men in Vermont made their living as farmers. Livestock required acreage and pastures for grazing, which led to clear-cutting of forests. Between 1850 and 1880, there were an estimated 35,000 farms in Vermont, and dairy cattle surpassed sheep in population and economic importance. It was the greatest period of growth in Vermont agriculture and the beginning of the butter era. Introduction of ice-cooled railroad cars in the 1850s allowed Vermont's dairy products to reach expanding markets, and butter trains to Boston ran the Vermont Central Railroad weekly between St. Albans and Boston. In 1869, the Vermont Dairymen's Association was formed, and in the 1870s, nearly 75% of Vermont's landscape was made up of agricultural crop fields or pasture for livestock. In 1872, the State Board of Agriculture was established, and in 1886, following the invention of the first centrifugal cream separator, the North River Creamery, the state's first butter factory, was established in Jacksonville, Vermont. In the 1890s, dairy farms remained small, milking just 15 to 25 cows per farm, and the Franklin County Creamery Association, which was the precursor to the St. Albans Cooperative Creamery, was operating the largest butter factory in the world, producing over 25,000 pounds of butter daily. The early 1900s introduced mechanization and technology, including shifts from horsepower to tractor power, hand milking to machine milking, and milk cooling technology. This led to farm size growth and shifts to larger commercial operations. In 1913, the Extension Service of the University of Vermont and State College of Agriculture was established. Vermont remained known for butter production, and in 1915 there were nearly 300 butter factories in the state, with a peak annual production of over 20 million pounds of butter. By the end of the 1920s, Vermont was supplying nearly 50% of Boston's fluid milk needs. During this time, the continued expansion of the fluid milk industry led to the export market for nearly 85% of milk produced in Vermont. Also during this time, Cabot Creamery began making cheese. Throughout the mid-1900s, dairy farms continued to become more and more efficient. The number of farms decreased, but the number of cows per farm and the amount of milk produced per cow increased. In 1978, the iconic ice cream company Ben & Jerry's was founded in Burlington. During the 1980s and 90s, fluid milk pricing fluctuated. Government buyout programs attempted to impact milk supply, but milk prices remained volatile. The early 2000s saw a mix of large-scale and smaller, specialized farms. Production of high-quality products for local markets gained popularity as diversification helped producers remain profitable. Vermont became well known for its small-scale specialty cheeses. In 2009, the Vermont legislature approved legal sale of raw milk by farms, and the organic dairy sector began to grow to meet consumer demands. Higher pay prices for certified organic farms helped to keep some farms in business. Today, the dairy industry remains the backbone of Vermont's agricultural industry. The next several slides reference data compiled in 2024 by the Vermont Dairy Promotion Council and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. The full report can be accessed online at www.vermontdairy.com. Since 2018, there has been a 34% decrease in the number of dairy farms in Vermont and a 37% increase in the number of cows per farm, proof that efficient milk production remains a priority for dairy producers. However, the graph on the left represents the breakdown of farms by size in terms of the number of milking cows. As a proportion of the total number of farms in the state, those categorized as small or milking fewer than 200 cows make up the majority. While dairy farms can be found in all corners of Vermont, more operations are located in Franklin, Orleans, and Addison counties. Dairy products and processing brings $5.4 billion in total economic activity to Vermont annually from milk, yogurt, butter, and cheese production, as well as livestock feed production and associated agricultural business. Each Vermont dairy cow provides over $8,000 in economic activity to the state annually. Vermont Dairy supports over 17,000 jobs and $812 million in wages and salaries annually. As of 2024, there were 480 dairy farms in Vermont. 1 in 4 Vermont dairy farms is certified organic, compared to 1 in 9 dairy farms nationally. And in 2022, 140 million pounds of certified organic milk was produced in Vermont. Consumers are willing to pay more for certified organic dairy products, and that impacts our landscape due to certified organic requirements for grazing. There are over 51,000 acres of certified organic hay, pasture, and cropland managed in Vermont. Additionally, there has been a 64% increase in the number of dairy goats from 2007 to 2022 in Vermont. There are 33 dairy goat farms in the state. Consumer demand for sheep milk cheeses has also increased. Nationally, there are an estimated 200 sheep dairy farms, 3 of which are located in Vermont. Vermont produced over 2.5 billion pounds of milk in 2022. That's about 300 million gallons. Vermont remains popular for award-winning specialty cheese production. As consumer demand for organic dairy products has increased, regulations have been developed to certify and verify production practices. These practices prioritize good pasture management to promote soil and plant health, which drives animal health and profit. Organic certification guidelines discourage premature grazing plants, grazing saturated soils, and overgrazing, and requires an annual inspection and application. Daily access to pasture during the grazing season and a minimum of 30% dry matter demand must be from pasture. Grazing record keeping, excluding livestock from waterways, and implementing buffer zones along waterways to reduce runoff and erosion are also priorities. Temporary variances may be granted under extreme weather conditions, such as drought, natural disasters, and extreme weather events. In Vermont, the grazing season is typically mid-May through mid-October. Aside from dairy production, there are a variety of other livestock that are grazed in Vermont. According to the 2023 New England Agricultural Statistics Annual Bulletin, there are a total of 6,500 agricultural operations with over 1.2 million acres in agricultural production. But this includes dairy, vegetable production, and all agricultural livestock. Any establishment from which $1,000 or more of agricultural products were sold that year. There is little accurate information available about the number and impacts of non-dairy grazing livestock in Vermont. But at the end of the day, managing grazing livestock in Vermont is directly related to the local food supply and food security, as documented by the work done by organizations like Vermont Farm to Plate, the Vermont Grass Farmers Association, and others. Today, Vermonters are very interested in utilizing the landscape to grow food to feed Vermonters, using regenerative management with a focus on building healthy soils and keeping waterways clean. Now we will focus on what has driven the need for technical service providers for livestock grazing operations and what their role is. All agriculture impacts the surrounding environment. Cultivating the land will change it and influence the immediate and surrounding ecosystem. This is true of how grazing livestock impacts the environment as well. The goal is to understand and manage the impact and resources in sustainable ways. The geography of Vermont is such that there are major water sources impacted by large portions of the landscape. Because of all the drainage of waterways into larger water sources, agricultural practices can greatly impact water quality. In the 1990s and early 2000s, water quality was becoming more and more of a concern in Vermont. In order to meet federally mandated water quality standards in 2015, Vermont passed Act 64, Vermont's Clean Water Act. The act established agricultural management regulations, enforcement frameworks, and funding to provide financial and technical assistance to the agricultural community. Required agricultural practices were defined and implemented. RAPs are standards to which all types of farms must be managed and are intended to improve the quality of all Vermont's water by reducing and eliminating cropland erosion, sediment losses, and nutrient losses through improved farm management techniques. Technical and compliance assistance, and where appropriate, enforcement to meet the state's goals of improving and protecting water quality. Today, the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources and Agency of Agriculture collaborate to uphold Act 64 on farms in regards to agricultural pollution. Funds are used to implement practices that help reduce phosphorus runoff in agricultural systems, including crop rotation, no-till and reduced-till practices, cover cropping, manure injection and incorporation, riparian buffers, grassed waterways and filter strips, nutrient management, livestock exclusion, and grazing management. Some of the funding available as a result of water quality concerns and rules is available directly to farmers through Vermont water quality programs. The full list of programs and resources is available on the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets website. Current programs include Best Management Practices Program, or BMP, which provides technical and financial assistance for on-farm improvements and structural conservation practices to improve water quality. Examples of funded projects include barnyard runoff collection, bedded pack facilities, composting stack pads, exclusion fencing and watering facilities, laneway development and stream crossings, manure storage systems, milkhouse waste collection and treatment, and silage leachate collection. Capital Equipment Assistance Program, or CEAP, provides financial assistance for equipment to aid in the reduction of surface runoff of agricultural waste to state waters and improve water quality. Eligible equipment fall into one or more of 5 categories, including precision agriculture, conservation tillage, cover cropping, waste management, and feed management. Some examples of eligible equipment include no-till planters or grain drills, manure injectors, dragline systems, composting equipment, bedded pack management equipment, and high skids to adjust mower cutting height. Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP, provides funds to reduce sediment runoff and improve water quality by removing land from agricultural production and establishing vegetated buffers. This program compensates agricultural landowners for taking land out of production when that is the best way to preserve or improve water quality. CREP also provides incentive payments and annual rental payments to establish forested buffers, vegetated filter strips, wetland restoration, and grassed waterways. Farm Agronomic Practices Program, or FAP, provides grants to implement soil-based agronomic practices that improve soil and water quality, and to support educational activities to improve soil health and water quality. Practices eligible for FAP payments include cover cropping, no-till pasture and hayland renovation, manure injection, and rotational grazing. Pasture and Surface Water Fencing Program, or PSWF, provides technical and financial assistance for pasture improvements and livestock exclusion from surface water. This funding can support material and installation expenses associated with permanent and temporary fence, livestock water systems, electric fence chargers, and laneways, the infrastructure needed to support well-managed grazing practices. Part of the technical assistance role that we can be for farmers is to connect them with these and other programs that might work best to meet their goals, help navigate the application process, and offer any support they might need that might be needed during the implementation. Now that you hopefully have an understanding of how the need for technical service providers evolved in Vermont, and a small part of how we can serve farmers, we are going to jump into how to do that job effectively. These are some considerations for visiting farms that are applicable no matter what the reason or purpose behind your visit might be. Number 1, be prepared before you head out. Review what you know about the farm you are visiting and any notes you have from previous visits. Check in with others who have worked with that farm in the past. Have a basic understanding of what type of livestock the producer is managing, the approximate land-based size that they are managing, and the context under which you have been invited onto the farm. For example, the producer may be interested in applying for state or federal program and need an approved grazing plan as part of the application. Number 2, be respectful, flexible, and efficient. Depending on the time of year, most producers are quite busy. Show up when you say you will, but understand that you may need to shift based on the producer's needs. For example, you may show up to the farm at the agreed upon time but find the producer engaged with the herd's veterinarian, attending to a difficult calving or a sick animal. Likely your best bet in this circumstance will be to connect with the producer briefly and offer to follow up at a later time to reschedule. Number 3, build connections. Making the effort to get to know people, build human connections, and social capital are invaluable. Small talk and chit-chat are not a waste of time, and showing interest in topics other than the reason for your visit are not only enjoyable but part of the job. Number 4, document. When working with individual farms, you may work with them intensively on specific projects and then follow up with less frequent visits and contact. Have a system to document your visits, conversations, and observations so that you have a resource to review prior to visits when you haven't been there in a while. This will also help you share any notes with other people who are working on the farm. Prevent asking the same questions repeatedly, and identify any topics that you want to learn more about, and keep a record of maps, contracts, and shared resources. You can also include details outside of your work focus, such as identifying any items that need follow-up, or helpful resources or contacts you can provide. There are a variety of tools you can use: notebooks, file folders, or apps like Microsoft OneNote. Find one that works for you and be consistent. Number 5, make sure that the producer has your contact information and be accessible for follow-up questions. If action items were identified during your visit, consider sending a follow-up email. If you offered additional resources or find information that you think might be helpful based on your conversation, make sure to deliver them in a timely manner. These tips might seem like common sense, but it can be a challenge to remember them all in the moment. For a deep dive into what makes a great service provider, be sure to watch the supplementary module for this portion of the course, featuring Cheryl Cesario with American Farmland Trust. Preventing the spread of livestock disease is the responsibility of anyone who works with or on farms. As part of your preparation, be prepared to take appropriate measures to protect the farms you visit and minimize the risk of introducing disease. When visiting any livestock farm, it is important to have an understanding of the current disease risk in your area and beyond. For example, highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, in dairy cattle has been a national concern in 2024 and 2025. You should also check in with the producer prior to visiting to gauge any biosecurity concerns they might have. Does the farm have any protocols in place? Establish permissions to visit the farm. Ask where to park. Avoid parking in feeding areas, feed storage areas, milk transfer areas, and equipment traffic lanes. Avoid tracking inorganic matter from other farms. Sanitize boots and any sampling equipment upon entering the farm and when leaving, using appropriate chemicals. Consider wearing disposable single-use boot covers and gloves, especially if handling animals, feed, or manure. And when possible, consider limiting farm visits to one farm per day to avoid cross-contamination. Making biosecurity easy by keeping the supplies that you need for frequent farm visits together and organized in your vehicle. Check out the biosecurity considerations for dairy or livestock farm service providers and extension personnel linked in the supplementary resources for this module for more details and helpful information. For the final portion of this module, we will shift and focus on the types of grazing management that exist, including when and why they might be implemented on farms. Many factors impact why and how producers manage their livestock. The species of livestock being grazed and their biological needs may be a big driver in what grazing system might be a good fit. Land-based factors may include owned acreage available, rented acreage available, access and orientation of shelter, electricity, and water. The farm's general topography, as well as presence of wetlands, forest, streams, or rivers, must also be considered. Additionally, soil type and other factors that impact what will or can grow, including elevation and climate, as well as historical use of the land, may factor in, especially if erosion or other damage has been inflicted because of overuse, lack of fertility, or neglect. Each of the grazing systems that we will discuss have different levels of infrastructure needed to be effectively managed. Insufficient infrastructure or lack of funds to improve fencing and waterline infrastructure may be a barrier to grazing management. Each system has a different level of management and labor required, and producer capacity may be limiting. Lastly, we are all always learning, and as service providers have the opportunity to meet farmers where they are and help them meet their goals by providing the technical support and resources that will get them there. The general goal for all types of grazing systems is to meet the needs of the grazing animal without negatively impacting the land base. You also need to consider the bigger picture farm goals, which take into account many different factors. For example, the goal of a small dairy farm that makes farm-fed cheeses might be to make high component milk to optimize cheese production, whereas a dairy farm that is shipping organic milk on the commercial market may have the goal of maximizing production while meeting the organic requirements for dry matter intake from pasture. Having an understanding of individual farm goals, both in terms of grazing management and bigger picture business goals, is imperative. We will talk more in depth about farm goals later in this course. 3 common types of grazing systems include continuous, fixed rotational, and management intensive. A continuous grazing system is one where livestock graze the same pasture for the entire grazing system. This system involves minimal infrastructure and labor. However, it often comes with the risk of overgrazing and the available acreage. Overgrazing promotes lower forage quality and quantity, including lower plant density and diversity, poor soil health, and potential erosion. This system also requires more pasture acreage per animal and often results in the uneven distribution of manure or fertility. We will learn more about pasture as a living system in the next module. When animals are left to graze in one paddock for extended time periods, they may graze plants very short, which can damage the growing points and will eventually kill the more desirable plant species, and allow for undesirable weed species to take over. This may also result in bare spots, which can increase the ground temperature and negatively impact soil biology. A fixed rotational grazing system is one where livestock follow a fixed schedule to rotate through set paddocks. This system requires more management than the continuous system, but the set schedule and permanent infrastructure simplifies management. This system also introduces pasture recovery periods and better distribution of manure or fertility. As we will cover in future modules, plant recovery is variable through the growing season, so a fixed grazing system likely will not take full advantage of variable plant growth and may lead to long-term decrease in forage quality and quantity. Compared to continuous grazing systems, a fixed rotational grazing system will require greater investments in infrastructure to fence in multiple paddocks and provide a water source in each paddock. Management-intensive grazing systems, also known as adaptive grazing, voisin grazing, or holistically planned grazing, and many other terms, are grazing systems where large fields are divided into smaller paddocks and animals are only grazed for a short period, often 1 to 3 days, followed by a variable rest period that allows plants to fully recover. This management follows the take half, leave half rule, where if the average height of forage in the paddock is 8 inches when the animals are turned out, 4 inches remains when they are removed from the paddock, so as not to damage the growing points of the plants and encourage quick regrowth. This system is the most beneficial for soil and plant health, and if we can optimize those, the result will be greater livestock production. Whether the objective is milk production or daily gain, production livestock will have better access to more digestible nutrients. Over time, this style of grazing management can help control weed growth through conditions for healthy and competitive desirable plant species. This system also gives grazers the best chance at surviving extreme weather conditions, whether you're talking about big rain events or drought, by encouraging soil and plant health and reducing management-related stressors to help minimize negative impacts. Frequent moves are important for managing parasite loads and minimizing the risk of parasitic infestations, especially for small ruminants like sheep. Optimal management of soil and plant health, as well as stocking density, may allow for a longer grazing season or the ability to stockpile feed for use after forages stop growing for the season. This system requires a combination of both permanent and temporary fence, which is often needed to adjust paddock sizes. Moving fence and animals may require additional daily labor. Record keeping and referencing previous year's grazing records can be helpful. More about grazing infrastructure and record keeping coming up in future course modules. This graphic is a good visual comparison of the 3 systems that we just reviewed. The water drops represent the water source. The solid lines represent permanent perimeter fence, and the dotted lines represent temporary interior fencing. The arrows show possible livestock movement through the subdivided paddocks. This concludes the main presentation for Module 1. Be sure to access the 2 supplementary modules for this portion of the course. The first one, referenced earlier, is presented by Cheryl Cesario, consultant with American Farmland Trust. Cheryl outlines her top 10 considerations for being a great service provider. The second supplementary module is a walkthrough of UVM Extension's Grazing Livestock website with UVM Extension Grazing Specialist Carly Bass. Explore all of the resources available to both producers and service providers.